Start, brother.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Welcome to another Quran study. We are going to start from Surah 27, verse 79. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Therefore, put your trust in God. You are following the manifest truth. So this is one of the most important verses that is in the Quran, and it is very important so that there is a reason why God tells us to put our trust in Him. After the coming of the messenger, we have learned that God does everything, even the things Satan does. He does by the will of God. It cannot be otherwise because God is the only one who can do anything at all. He is the only one with power and controls everything. And what is better and smarter than to put your trust in the one who controls everything? And of course, he is the most just. He knows the future and knows exactly what will happen. And promises us that if you trust in him, he will protect you. He promises perfect happiness, perfect health, and perfect wealth. So imagine you have a friend who can see into the future and know exactly what will happen to you. He promises to help you with your problems that are yet to come. And because he knows the future, he also knows exactly how to prevent it. Surely it's smart to listen to him and do what he says. And here we are with all that person's instructions telling us what to do, what's going to happen, what to expect, with all the evidence and advice. So isn't it wise, therefore, to follow him and to do as he says, and to put your trust in God? 2780 says, you cannot make the dead nor the deaf hear the call if they turn away. So God says in the Quran that whatever you do cannot help those who deserve to go to hell. You cannot deliver the message to them. What is striking is that God here mentions deafness in addition to being dead. One who does not listen to this message and turn his back is equal to that person. So imagine you are sitting next to that person and talking to him. Whatever you say and whatever evidence you give him, that person will never hear you or respond to the message. So in my personal life, I have experienced more often and tried to convince people. Like I passed this message on them and entered into discussions with some people, showing evidence, tried all sorts of ways to show that this is the truth. Sorry. So I tried to explain it in the simplest way, but at the end it was like talking to a dead person. So I really understand what it means to make the dead hear you. It's like, you know, they are like dead people. It doesn't matter what evidence you give them, whatever you tell them, whatever proof you show them, still they are like a dead person and they are not going to believe. So, and then they come up with counter arguments, like you answer all their questions and come up with the evidences, and yet they do not believe. So that's why it's important to know that there are two groups of people. So one deserves to get close to God, and a group who deserves to go to hell. And God knows who deserves what, and for those who don't deserve it. So that's unchangeable. If someone deserves to go to heaven, no one can change it. And God knows who is going to go to hell or heaven. And indeed, you can change it. And that's why at some point we must stop worrying about those people. So it's not up to us, it's up to God. Our only job is to deliver the message. It was the same for the prophets and the messengers that came, and God told them the same thing. Don't worry about those people. It's not you guys who are going to convince them. It's, you know, if they deserve to go to heaven, they will. And if they deserve to go hell, you can't stop it from happening. And sometimes, actually mostly, it's like the people around us, it's our nearest family, that you can see that the ones whom you eat, you go travel together, you have times together, knowing that those people, after giving them the message, knowing that they mostly not going to believe and they are destined to hell, and knowing that you can do anything about it. In the first place, in the first of my years as I accepted the message, I really tried to convince, everyone, because, and the reason is really because this is the truth. It's like not something that we have invented ourselves. It is the truth. So the thing that you want to do is you want to convince them, you want them to believe in this message like you do, and you don't want them to go to hell. You want your closest to believe as you believe in the truth indeed. So but most of you guys also know that it isn't like that. They are not going to believe. Most of them don't believe. So you are a little bit lonely, I think, in this case, that in the area where you live with your friends and with all the family, that most of them don't believe. In my own case, I don't see actually anyone who's really believing. I had one friend. I just spoke today with him about how his life is going, and in the first place, he told me that he accepted the message, but then he didn't do any research. He didn't really put time and effort in understanding what the message is and what to do. So in all those years, and this friend of mine was the first person I've told, because he was a close friend of mine, and we shared mostly the same ideas. We had a lot of common. So he was the first person I wanted to tell. And after so many years, seeing that he doesn't really believe in the message the way how we believe, and the way how God mentions in the Quran, and how the covenant of the messenger of the covenant tells us, it's like you're the only one in my area. I am so grateful that I have you guys, but I can see now how less people are going to believe in the message, and the majority of the people are not going to believe. And God says this in the Quran. In 27:81, he says, "Nor can you guide the blind out of their straying. The only ones who will hear you are those who believe in our revelations and decide to be submitters." So here we see again that God says they are not only deaf, but they are also blind, and you cannot guide them. And the only ones who will hear you are those who believe in our revelation. So the message that God has sent, the ones who believed in it and decide to be submitters. So what I understand from this is deciding to be a submitter is not like saying that you are a submitter, because God says in the Quran that if you say that you're a believer, that's not enough. God says that when you say that you're a believer, he is going to test you like he tested the people before us. So you need to prove that you are a believer, and to do that, God needs to test you. And after you went for the test, then you can say that you are a believer. So God wants also proof of your believing. Only lip service is not enough. Most people who are like Sunni or Shia Muslims, they think that when they die, they are going into hell for a few years maybe, and after having their punishment, they are going to heaven. There's also a verse about this where God says that the children of Israel say that the fire of hell is going to burn them just for a little bit of time, and after that they are going to heaven. So this is a trick of Satan, that he plays with those people, thinking that only saying that they believed will save them. They are thinking that they are going to say, okay, I didn't do all the commandments, what God said in the Quran, for example. I didn't pray, I didn't do the Ramadan and, the commandments that God is giving in the Quran. I didn't do all those things, but I said at least one time in my life that I believe in God and that I believe in the messenger. And so it doesn't matter what happened. In the end, I will go to heaven after burning for my sins. But we learn from the Quran that that is not the case and that's not going to happen. Those people are going to hell and they are going to stay forever in hell. 2782, it says the computer is the creature. At the right time, we will produce for them a creature made of earthly materials, declaring that the people are not certain about our revelations. In the deep note, it says 2782, the numbers 2 plus 7 plus 8 plus 2 is equal to 19. So the computer was required to unveil the Quran's mathematical miracle. And it proved that most people have discarded God's message. See appendices 1 up to 19. So I have put about the Dabbatul Arts is in Arabic, so it's about the creature, and there are some quite hadith about this creature. I have put here some examples so we can see what kind of hadith they are. It says Dabbatul Ard is a wonderful looking creature who will emerge from the hill Safa. He will travel all the cities at high speed. Dabbatul Ard will be eloquent. In one hand, he will carry the staff of the Prophet Moses, and in the other hand, the ring of the Prophet Suleiman. He will leave a shining mark on the foreheads of the Muslims with the staff, while with the ring, he will stamp a black mark on the foreheads of the disbelievers. At that moment, it is clear to see who Muslim or non-believer is. So at that moment, you can see who is a Muslim, so a believer, and a non-believer is. This sign will never fade or change, which means that a disbeliever will remain a disbeliever forever and the Muslim will be a believer forever. In another one, it says Dabbatul Ard has 4 feet like the feet of a camel and wings like a bird. Its head is like the head of an ox. Its ears are like the ears of an elephant. Its tail is like the tail of a ram. Can you imagine? So these people had very imaginary thinking. So people will get away from that beast. Some people, being afraid of it, will begin to perform salat. The beast will come up to him and stamp his face, saying, "Oh, the person, are you performing salat now?" Though believers will be distinguished from disbelievers and they will be recognized. So this, what I have read, is from this is the reference, and it's like hadith about Dabbatul Ard. So what people were, thinking that it is in the Quran, and this was a discussion like for many years, and you can see that there are a lot of ideas about Dabbatul Ard. In Wikipedia, I have read, while the majority of contemporary Islamic scholars accept the traditional exegesis of the beast of the earth, the Dabbatul Ard as a literal creature who will appear in the end of times, some interpret the beast as possibly being made of various parts, including disease like HIV. Another interpretation holds that this beast is related to materialistic tendencies, and thus the Dabba does not appear at the end of the world, but rather will doom a given nation or society. So for more than 1400 years, people have argued about what this creature is, and hundreds of hadiths have been made up about this, where it's explained what this creature is and what it is for. So, but after the arrival of the miracle of 19, we have received the actual information from the Quran. It was with the help of the computer that the miracle emerged. Computer is made with materials from the earth, and after we have received all the information, we can say with certainty what this creature is and what it is for. So indeed, there are those who believe in it and those who do not. And one of the things it has given the believers is certainty. Those who will not believe will never believe. So no matter what you do. And when I was young, I always wanted to know what this Dabbatul art was, and people were telling stories and hadith about the situation. And after learning what it truly is, the correct information that comes from the Quran, given by the Messenger of the Covenant, we can see the logic behind it. And we can see that all of this is for one who uses his logic and who uses his mind. And one of the most important thing is that you should be truthful towards yourself while studying these things. And if you're not truthful, of course, you are not going to believe. But if you are, you can see that the message is extremely clear in the Quran. If you compare all of these, this was just a few of the hadith that I could find about Dabbatul Ard. And here you see, for example, telling how the Dabbatul Ards look like a feet of a camel, wings like a bird, head of an ox, ears of an elephant, and the tail is like the tail of a ram. And this is supposedly said by, they say that the Prophet has said these things. So, on the other hand, we have the Quran, right, where we have this clear information about what it is, and that God, opens the information for us after more than 1400 years. We should be very grateful for this. We are not left behind with all these stories and not knowing in which to believe and not knowing which one is true or not. We are so lucky that we got this information that God has given us. We should be really extremely thankful to it. And it just happened. It's like the year 1974. Where it started, that the information came, where God is talking about these things. 2783. The day will come when we summon from every community some of those who did not believe in our proofs forcibly. Study the Quran's mathematical code. 2784. When they arrive, he will say, "You have rejected my revelations before acquiring knowledge about them. Is this not what you did?" So one of the things I often see is that a lot of people don't do research. They don't take the time for it. This also shows that they don't care and show no interest in it. Even if it's the truth, apparently the truth is not important to them, because if they did, they'd be bothered to look at the evidence. It's much easier to ignore it right away and not accept it. When you have to make a decision about something important in your life, so you are going to spend time thinking about it. I know that what many people do and what is advised to do is to sleep on it overnight. So there is a saying that if you want to make an important decision, you just don't make it immediately. You just think about it, and to sleep at least one night over it, so you can relax and use your logic and use your mind to decide what to do about it. And what is more important than to decide about your hereafter? It's like forever. The hereafter is forever, and you have two places to go. Or you're going to end up in heaven, or you're going to end up in hell, and you're going to stay there forever. So at least just sleep on the night and give it some time, and you can decide on it tomorrow. Not right away, but let's say give it some time. And unfortunately, for many people, this is not the case, and the choice is made immediately. even after showing the evidence and talking to them for hours, um, you're talking to them, giving them, showing them the proofs and the evidences. Some of them, they do listen, they wait, they do listen. And from my experience, most of the time, in the end, they were saying what was written in Surah 74, verse 31, I believe, saying this, and then what? What is going to happen? You know, this 19, it's not important. Most of them act like this, exactly the way like God says in the Quran. 27:85. They will incur the requital for their wickedness. They will say nothing. So can you imagine anyone who's currently coming up with all kinds of arguments and looking for ways not to accept this message? Ways like saying Basmala consists of 21 letters. So we had this example, right? And the Messenger of the Covenant is telling also in one of the videos that they were showing the evidence, and this guy came. It was probably an Arab who came and he said, yeah, Basmala doesn't consist 19 letters, but it's 21. So they asked them to count, and this guy was counting invisible letters. So they won't be able to say anything more in the hereafter. This guy who was talking about it and saying, coming with arguments and saying that it is not true, God says that they will say nothing. They will say nothing in the hereafter because they can't. As God says in this verse, they will say nothing. Have they not seen that we made the night for their rest and the day lighted? These should be sufficient proof for people who believe. So now, after, with all the technology we have, we can see why it is like this. That, you know, the night rest is very important for us, and that, you know, the rest you have at night is not the same as when it's day. And we should also think about it and be thankful towards God that He created night. You know, not just, okay, it's night and go on with it, but think about it. Like these verses we are reading in the Quran, where God gives us examples over and over again about a lot of things. It is not for nothing, right? We should, in any case, in any matter, is it about the sleeping, the night, the food that we are eating, you know, the all the things that God has given us, we should think about it and be extremely thankful for what He has given us. And God tells us to think about it as well. And here He says that these should be sufficient proofs for people who believe. So if we are people who are believing, this should be sufficient proof for us. Actually, every verse in the Quran is sufficient proof for a believer that this Quran is the word of God. 27:87. On the day when the horn is blown, everyone in the heavens and the earth will be horrified, except those chosen by God. All will come before Him forcibly. So we had already talked about allegorical examples that God gives in the Quran so that we can better understand certain things. And God gives us examples of what it will be like in our language and knowledge of this world, so that we can have an idea and imagine certain things. And same goes for the horn. And what I understand by this is that there will be a moment when it happens, and it will start with something that everyone in the heaven and on earth will understand. And apparently this is something that will make everyone very afraid, except those whom God has chosen. So for a very long time I thought that, you know, when the horn is blown, it was like a sound that everyone can hear, right? That we are going to hear, at least if the people are going to hear this voice that comes out from a horn, and then everyone is going to be horrified. But what I understood from our last Quran studies is that this is also one of an allegorical example. Like we had this, the studies about the heaven and hell, where God tells us what is going to happen and how it is there. So we have just an idea about it in this world with our worldly minds, but the hereafter is nothing like this world, right? So it's really different, and we can't really understand it because we don't live there, and only when we die and the veils in our eyes are opened and we can see the things, you know, like they are in reality, then we can understand. So this is what I thought about the horn too, that it's not like a real, that there is not a person, you know, this, you have this angel who is, his only duty is to blow the horn, and when it's time he is going to blow, you know, like a human being, like if he has a mouth and wind is going to go through the horn, and then it's going to make a sound, and then everyone is going to die, and then for the second time he's going to blow the horn again, and all will rise. Earth's movement, a scientific miracle. 2788. When you look at the mountains, you think that they are standing still, but they are moving like the clouds. Such is the manufacture of God, who perfected everything. He is fully cognizant of everything you do. So what strikes me here is that God compares the movement of the mountains with that of the clouds. Verses have been made public just over 1400 years ago. So the verses here were sent more than 1400 years ago. And Muhammad, who lived in Mecca at a time when people knew very little about the earth. So God sends a message saying this, that the mountains are moving like the clouds. And he says, you think that they are standing still, but in reality they aren't, they are moving. And I wonder how those people reacted to this verse. So had they understood it as we understood it today, but apparently not, right? So because people at the time thought that they thought that the earth was flat and that it was stationary. And what makes it even better is that these kinds of verses where God gives certain information about something, you know, after 1400 years are still correct. So the Quran is sent, you know, God could choose to send the Quran in a time where technology was, you know, like in our time, or even more complicated, where in a time where we know more about the world and about, you know, everything around us. But God chose to send the Quran like more than 1400 years ago, in a time when people really thought that the world was flat and it was stationary, and a lot of, you know, the information that we have at the moment they didn't have. Besides information, we also have like pictures and videos we can see with our own eyes. Lately, there was this James Webb telescope has been sent, and we could see some pictures from the universe, more detailed pictures, because it can catch more light that is coming towards us. You know, the Quran is not sent in this time. It's just sent 14 years ago when, you know, extremely a lot of things were unknown by humans. And telling those people that the mountains are moving like the clouds is like unbelievable, right? And yet you had some people who were believers. They believed in everything that was sent by God. Even if they didn't understand it, they still believed because they knew it is from God, the creator of those mountains and the clouds. He is saying that they are not stationary and that they are moving like the clouds. So they are believing in it. In our time, it's much easier to believe in it because you know that the earth is round and the earth is, moving, and we know that, how the mountains are made and what their purpose is. So to understand this verse for us is much easier, because we have all this information. And another reason for the unbeliever to study Quran is that this information that is sent more than 1400 years ago is in the Quran, and it's correct. And of course, there are other verses like this where God gives information about things that the people of that time had not yet discovered. So someone who, like someone who's an atheist maybe, or a Christian, a scientist, who, if that person is truly truthful, towards himself, someone who is really seeking the truth, after looking at the evidences, this even should be sufficient enough to see that this book is not just a book, and it should have, it's not like another book. There are things in it that you just can't make up. You just can't make up these kind of things. That's the things that are also correct, even after many, many years. How many books are there that's written, and where it's written the things about what's going to happen in the future, and giving information, scientific information about the world and the stars and the flowers, the animals, a lot of things, and all of it is correct. How many books are there? From what I know, there's only one book that gives information about all kind of things, and all the things that are written there is correct. The day of judgment. Those who bring good works in their records will receive far better rewards, and they will be perfectly secure from the horrors of that day. As for those who bring evil works, they will be forced into hell. Do you not requite it for what you did? I am simply commanded to worship the Lord of this town. He has made it a safe sanctuary. And he possesses all things. I am commanded to be a submitter. I am commanded to be a submitter. And to recite the Quran. Whoever is guided for his own good. And if they go astray, they then say, I am simply a warner. So we see here that Muhammad's only job was to recite the Quran. He was also obliged to follow what was revealed to him. Here we see a very clear verse in which God has the Prophet say what his job is. And yet, this is not enough for those who believe in other books in addition to the Quran. So in my family, I see a lot of people keeping the Quran the same as Bukhari. Whereas in the Quran, God says that He only revealed the Quran to the Prophet. As the Messenger of the Covenant said, only the Quran and nothing but the Quran. So my brother, who is a Sunni, I had this discussion with him about the Quran and Bukhari, and I asked him where he puts Bukhari. He was giving all the time examples of the hadith, and in every example that he gave, I came up with the Quran ayats, with the Quran verses, to show him that Bukhari is not the truth, and that these are the words of God. But he was keeping the Bukhari in the same level as the Quran. Like, it's not like an idea, right? That he doesn't know what he's doing, but he is knowing what he's doing, and he knows what he's saying. And I asked him, is the Quran and Bukhari equal to one each other? And he said, yes, they are equal. In one hand you have the Quran, the word of God, with its miracles and the profound the verses that are there. Not only the miracle of 19 which is extremely great. But also the other verses where God explains and actually proves that this book is from God. And on the other hand, we have this book called Bukhari, made up by people saying that these are the words of the Prophet, of the doings of the Prophet. And he is just making them equal, putting the Bukhari next to the Quran. Like, but we know exactly how many verses there are in the Quran, right? We know exactly how many chapters there are, how many surahs there are. It is not a secret, but if you ask them how many hadiths do you have, they can't answer. There is not an exact amount of hadith which they believe in. They say, they give always an estimate, right? They say, okay, we estimate that you have such and such amount of Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Hadith. Here we see in the Quran that the Prophet, he himself says in these ayahs that he is simply commanded to worship the Lord of his town and has made a safe sanctuary. And he says that I am commanded to be a submitter. So what should we be? We should be submitters too, of course. And he says to recite the Quran. He doesn't say recite the Quran and the Hadith or the Quran or my Sunnah. He says only to recite the Quran. And in the end, he says, I am simply a warner. We learn from the Messenger of the Covenant in one of his videos. If I'm not mistaken, it was the video where he tells people that he is a messenger of God. And he says that being a messenger doesn't mean that you are better than anyone else. And Satan has used this in those years. He made like Jesus or Joseph or the other messengers and the prophets, like putting them very high, people like who have extremely, like gods. He made gods of them. But here we see in the Quran, and we learn that the messengers are just human beings like all of us. And being a messenger doesn't mean that you are better than anyone else. And we can read that he says, I am simply a warner. So the reason, in the Quran, God says that he only revealed the Quran to the Prophet and nothing else, only the Quran. And the reason this is so important is that you worship the one whose commands you follow. If you do what it says in the Quran, you accept God as your God. If you do what's written in other books, it means that you accept them as a God, even if you don't realize this. A good example in the Quran is when God tells the angels to bow to Adam. The angels have bowed except Satan, who were, at the moment, who were they worshipping? Were they worshipping Adam? But no, you worship the one whose commands you follow. So in this case, it's God that the angels worship, because they were doing what God tells them to do. So that means that if you follow the books that are written by human beings and you are praying like they tell you to pray, and do your give your charity zakat as how they tell you to do it, and all the commands that we know in Islam, if you are doing it like the way they are telling you to do it, that means they are your God. But if you do it as it is in the Quran, then God is your God. So that's why it is of utmost importance that we follow only what God has sent down. That is why it is important that we do exactly what He says with everything in the Quran. That we don't add things on our own, like do the prayer differently as it is in the Quran. So when God says do it this way, we do it that way. For we know no better than God. He is the one who knows everything best. By adding things yourself, you say that you know better than God. So something that God does not forgive, and we call it shirk. God says it's called idolatry. He doesn't forgive that. And God explains us in the Quran what it means. Um, that's why we should be very, very careful with it. If we do something, we surely first need to look in the Quran after doing it. And the reason why people are not doing it is mainly because of the ego. So for the ego says it knows better and is better. So that's why we must be very careful in everything we do and always follow what God says in the Quran. So and if we don't, you always get disagreement and all sorts of illogical things. As mentioned above, about the creature from the earth, people will think all kinds of crazy things, and many people will believe without thinking. Like they made up this thing about the creature of the earth, that he has that kind of legs and ears and eyes, and you have millions of people who believe in this. And this is because people don't accept the Quran as the only source of religion. If they did, they wouldn't be in this situation. 2793. And say, praise be to God. He will show you his proofs until you recognize them. Your Lord is never unaware of anything you do. And here we see and witness his evidence. God be praised. May God forgive us and place us close to him. Hopefully we will be the ones who will get close to him, and we see his proofs and everything that comes from him. Hear our prayers, our God, and accept us as believers. So 1406 years later, 19 times 74th year later, the greatest miracle has been made public. So the Quran has been studied and viewed from all sides by countless people, and until the year 1974, no one managed to see the greatest miracle in the Quran. And it was, of course, intended for the Messenger of the Covenant to discover it using the Quran. Using the computer. So we see that whoever wrote this book also has control over everyone who studies this book, and easily make sure that no one can see it for such a long time. And it can only be done by someone who monitors everyone and controls the time. So this is one of the things that, for more than 1400 years ago, the Quran is like studied by a lot of people. And after seeing the miracle, noticing it, seeing the evidence, you can say, it was obvious. Like, how in the world is something like this not seen by someone else? You have 114 surahs, it's like the last verse has, the last surah has 6 verses. It's like 19 times 6. 114 is 19 times 6 times 19. And Basmala consists of 19 letters. These simple things that are in the Quran, and people who were, looking at the Quran and searching for miracles, counting it, and still no one could find it, because it was meant for the Messenger of the Covenant to find it. And for a book to be written so many years ago, and where you have a hidden secret in in Surah 74, and it's revealed in the year 1974, exactly 1406 years later, 19 times 74 years later. This can only be done by the one who controls the time, right? Who controls also the minds of all those people who were, looking at the Quran and searching for some miracles or counting them and doing research on it. And this alone should be sufficient evidence for one using his mind, and unfortunately, only a very small part of humanity uses their minds, and most of the people lose against their ego. We go to Surah 28. It is called History, in Arabic Al-Qasas. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, TSM. See Appendix 1 for details of the Quran's miraculous mathematical code and the meaning of significance of these Quranic initials. In verse 2, it says, these letters constitute proofs of this profound book. And as mentioned above, the author of this book indicates that these letters are the proofs of this book. And yet, no one managed to figure out what these letters meant until Rashid Khalifa discovered this. Though we see over and over throughout the whole Quran that God shows his proofs. And how can you still not believe after something like that? So, and what's stopping you? And it is apparently the ego again, right? So, and it's not for nothing that God tells us to kill our egos. Only then we can be saved. So also the Messenger of the Covenant says in one of his videos that it's all these things, what is preventing from believing? And he says it is the ego. And we really need to kill our egos to be able to see the proofs and everything that God has sent in this book. It's such an importance. 28:3. We recite to you herein some history of Moses and Pharaoh truthfully for the benefit of people who believe. Pharaoh turned into a tyrant on earth and discriminated against some people. He persecuted a helpless group of them, slaughtering their sons while sparing their daughters. He was indeed wicked. God compensates the oppressed. We will to compensate those who were oppressed on earth and to turn them into leaders and make them the inheritors. And to establish them on earth and to give Pharaoh, Haman, and their troops a taste of their own medicine. Confidence in God. We inspired Moses' mother, nurse him, and when you fear for his life, throw him into the river without fear or grief. We will return him to you and will make him one of the messengers. So here we see another example of putting your trust in God. So what must it have been like for Moses' mother to leave her newborn in the river? So this is, of course, a test from God. And she's also immediately told that he will become one of the messengers. God says in the Quran that he created Moses before his own eyes and that he made him for himself. You know, like you are the mother of Moses and you are getting this message from God where he tells you that if you fear for his life, throw him into the river. We are going to make a messenger of him and we are going to return him to you. God promises that. God promises this. And we see in 28:8, Pharaoh's family picked him up only to have him lead the opposition and to be a source of grief for them. That is because Pharaoh, Haman, and their troops were transgressors. Inside the lion's den, Pharaoh's wife said, "This can be a joyous find for me and for you. And you, do not kill him, for he may be of some benefit for us, or we may adopt him to be our son." They had no idea. The mind of Moses' mother was growing so anxious that she almost gave away his identity. But we strengthened her heart to make her a believer. So God immediately comes to the rescue in the most difficult moments. In the end, she was a mother and, could no longer bear to see her son like this and was, of course, afraid that he would die. But God helps her and reassures her. God says to have straightened her heart and made her a believer. So means that believers have a strong heart, right? We need to have a very strong heart to put our trust in God and to do exactly what God tells us to do. And here in this book, Quran, which we know that is definitely the word of God, God is giving us examples of what already happened. He told the mother of Moses to do, to put him in the river, and told him that he's going to make a messenger of him, to bring him back to her, etc., and to have, to put your trust in God. So you can only have this if you put your trust in God. So she said in 28:11, we read, she said to his sister, trace his path. She watched him from afar while they did not perceive. The infant returned to his mother. We forbade him from accepting all the nursing mothers. His sister then said, I can show you a family that can raise him for you and take good care of him. Though we restored him to his mother in order to please her, remove her worries, and to let her know that God's promise is the truth. However, most of them do not know. So God could also choose not to do, right? He could also choose to bring Moses to the Pharaoh's palace, and some woman, he could accept the milk of some other woman as well. But God promised to bring him back to his mother, right? And that Moses would accept milk from someone else. So then, and here God explains why it happened that way. We see here his mercy. Take your child, save Moses from Pharaoh's soldiers. So God saved his life, right? In the beginning, he would be killed by the soldiers of Pharaoh. In that year, the boy children who were born, if it's a boy, then Pharaoh decided to kill the boys, and he was born in that year. So, and God saved his life, and then he brings him to the palace, makes sure that he's accepted as a son by Pharaoh and his family, but also does not just leave Moses' mother behind and gives her child back to her. So it is really a masterful plan. So, and we see that God is really the best planner. Can you imagine? This is like a wonderful movie, right? You have this tyrant, the Pharaoh, who is killing, because if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if it's wrong. He got this information from his people that someone will come and destroy him and his lands, and then and they tell him that it will be a man from the children of Israel, the Jews, right? Then he decides to kill them, and then after killing all the boys, the people tell him, yeah, if you kill the boys, we won't have any slaves left, who will work for us and do the things. So he decides to do 1 year of killing and 1 year not. So that's how this came forward. But please correct me if I'm wrong with this. With this. 28:14. When he reached maturity and strength, we endowed him with wisdom and knowledge. We do regard the righteous. Moses commits manslaughter. 28:15. Once he entered the city unexpectedly without being recognized by the people, he found 2 men fighting. One was a Hebrew from his people, and the other was an Egyptian from his enemies. The one from his people called on him for help against his enemy. Moses punched him, killing him. He said, "This is the work of the devil. He is a real enemy and a profound misleader." He said, "My Lord, I have wronged my soul. Please forgive me." And he forgave him. He is the most merciful. So I would like to end here, God willing. If there are any questions, please go ahead and ask them.
Inshallah.
Was it over 40 minutes?
I think so. But it's okay, brother. So, mashallah, brother, I was really surprised to see so many hadith about the verses that you mentioned about the creature. And actually, it was really interesting to see what people have imagined and in disillusionment created about this verse. And I looked at the Arabic and it said Dabbatun min al arz, so it was like a creature from the earth, and then they shortened it to say the earth creature, Dabbatul Ard, if I'm not mistaken, that's what they said. And then they started adding to it and creating all sort of stories about it, and they're very imaginative. It's really interesting to see how imaginative they are, but the truth of the matter is that the creature is computer and we now know about it. And it's really interesting to see how like the verses of Quran are being interpreted like how Satan has interpreted the verses of Quran in different ways, and they're just like being made into complete Hollywood movies. You know, I mean, like people are just like adding to it crazy. You know, they see one verse in Quran and then they have added numerous nonsense to it, and then they have created their own stories. And even worse than that, they have attributed it to Prophet Muhammad. So, and if we just think logically, how was it possible for Prophet Muhammad to know all this information, although he was forbidden from saying anything about the Quran other than the things that he was told to utter, which were like direct inspiration from God. And people are completely oblivious to this fact, and they follow the hearsay of this. And other than that, people even don't read the hadith. They just hear something from somebody and they start following it. And that's the unfortunate situation that people are in. But we know if God wants to actually guide somebody, if the wills of God is actually to for somebody to be guided, then that person will be guided. If not, that person will not be guided.
MashaAllah. Yeah, mashallah, brother. One of the things that I felt while reading, studying the verses is that especially about this creature. There are a lot of hadiths. This is just a few hadiths that's written about it. You have like in the tens, I believe, lots of hadiths that I heard even before I became a submitter. So now I am so grateful to God that that I was someone who was believing. I believed in these hadiths because at the time they taught us that the hadiths are the words of the Prophet and they originally came from God. Because he couldn't say anything that God didn't say. So everything that the Prophet says comes from God, and the hadiths are from the Prophet, so also the hadiths are from God. This was the way how we believe. So how imaginative and how unbelievable these things are. The creature with this hadith where it says the with the legs and the eyes like the ears like an elephant. Even those things you are forced to believe in them because you believe that the hadiths are from God as well. And we are so fortunate, and I felt so blessed that we have this information and that we should only follow what is written in the Quran, and that those are the words of God and the hadiths are just made up. It's such a relieving thing, and we should be really thankful that God has given this information to us and allowed us to believe in this information.
Yes,
because
mashallah, brother.
you have a lot of people who also get this information but they don't believe in it. It's like they are kept in that position. They can't move, they can't think otherwise. So looking from this side to those people in which I was like them years ago, you know, because we were believing in those hadiths as well. And now seeing the truth and not believing in this, you know, nonsense that Satan, you know, has made up. And it's really strange, right? Like, this is so unbelievable, the things that are written in this hadith, and still millions of people are believing in it without thinking of how is this possible that, you know, this can happen, you know, a creature like that. But yeah, this is the way how he tricked people. And we should be always careful, you know, with the information that we need to deal with in our life. And always check with the Quran, right? Always do a double check in the Quran if that's correct or not. Lately, I just you know, made a small mistake about the Shabbat, but that is like out of topic. I will gladly to tell about it and to get some more information about it. But we should be very careful of the things we believe in and the things we say, especially about religion. MashaAllah.
MashaAllah, brother. Another nonsense that they have created along the same lines is the idea of Dajjal, you know, which actually comes from, like, up to the point that I know, it comes from Christianity, and in Christianity it is Antichrist, and then they have translated it into Dajjal, and then they have created all sort of nonsense around it. You know, they have a complete movie around it. You know, just like that, this will happen, that will happen, this is going to happen, that is going to happen, and it's just like absolute nonsense. But this is really, I mean, as you mentioned, we are so blessed that we have the correct information. And not only that, but also we are absolutely certain that this is from God, you know, because of the miracle of 19, you know, like that's why we have to be absolutely truthful to the information that we have understood and is actually from God, and discard the rest of the things that we might know about, and we know for a fact that they are from hadith and the sunnah attributed to Prophet Muhammad. So we have to read Quran as much as we can, and like keep our information updated, so that we don't say something that is not actually in Quran and is not what God actually said. Subhanallah.
Yeah, I also remember, you know, even it was just like yesterday. I was studying the Quran and the Hadith and all those kind of, and because of all those made up Hadith in the Shia world and the Sunni world, you know, I remember going to, you know, bowing while I was doing my salat. It was a Sunni salat, of course, the same way, but I remember that I, like, truly with all my open heart, I asked God this exact thing. I said, "Oh my God, the information and all the things that I have learned until now, it is so complicated, and it's like there is no, you know, it's like in one hadith you hear something, and in another hadith it's like the opposite." And it's like so complicated, everything is saying something else, and it's not like a straight religion where you have, you know, straight rules and everything is clear. And reason is because at the moment I accepted the hadith also as like a source of religion. So I asked God, you know, to show me the right path, to show me what truly the religion is, and the religion that He has sent, because I couldn't accept it that this is so complicated. Like, you know, even with the simplest thing, while praying, how is it possible that you have like 50 kind of prayer movements, you know, all different from one another, and with where you have this halal, the other one says haram. Where you have, he says, yeah, if you do this, then your salat will be broken, and the other says, no, it will not. You know, it was like so confusing. And after that, immediately, I believe the day after, or in 1 week, within 1 week, I got this message from God. You know that we should only follow the Quran, nothing but the Quran. What can I ask more for? You know, it's like the best thing that can ever happen. And after that, you get this clear message. You know, this Quran is so beautiful. It's like written so beautifully that it's so clear that you get your answers. You know, like everything you have, the questions you have about life and the hereafter. God says also the same thing in the Quran. He says we put everything in this book, like we everything that we need to understand about this life and the hereafter, and why we are here and what's going to happen and how we should act. You know, it's all written here and it's really clear. But this book, the Quran, I read before, right? Before I became a submitter, I read as well. But the at that time, I read it, but I didn't really understand, because all the verses you are reading, you are looking up with the hadith as well. You are looking to the hadith. So throughout the window of hadith, you are trying to understand the Quran. But if you eliminate everything and you ask God, you know, for guidance, and to show him, to show you the true way, God says in the Quran, I believe in, we had last week, it was in Surah verse 2 and 195 or 92, I believe, where he says, if you pray to me, I will hear your prayers. You know, I will answer your prayers. And that's what I did. So for all the people that I talk with, I ask them to ask God for guidance. Like, you need to put everything aside and ask God for guidance and accept it after he has given it to you. Because if you don't ask, you are not going to be guided. You are not going to see the truth. MashaAllah.
Subhanallah, the mathematical code is so intricate and so like impossible to imitate, that even with the quantum computers that we have today, we, and also artificial intelligence, we are unable to have any book like with this, like in any language, if like to have both the literally excellence, so that the book says something, says like conveys information in a logical format, and in a very intricate way, at the same time have a mathematical actually system behind it, which is very intricate, like the miracle of 19. It's like just absolutely impossible to be imitated, because even like right now with the computers that we have, even understanding it is really at the same time that it is easy, you think about it and you think, okay, so it's very logical. At the same time, it's like very, very highly impossible to be imitated in any way. Even like I would say that it would be really hard to come up with 2 pages of any language with any prime number to have such a like intricate mathematical intricacy at the same time have the literally excellence. Subhanallah.
So the story, right, about Moses and why Pharaoh killed the children, was that correct? Is there any mistake in it? That because he heard from his people that someone will come from the Jews, the Hebrews, and he will destroy him and his, I don't really remember exactly what was written about it. Do you guys know?
Mashallah, I personally haven't seen anything of that sort in the Quran, but probably we have all heard it. It could be from the previous scripture. It could be, personally don't know where it comes from.
All right. Any other comments or question? I guess, okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I guess we can conclude our study today. So, God willing, our next study will be on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.